In this video, we're going to review how to multiply and divide integers. And really, we're going to see if we can develop the rules to see where these rules came from. Okay, so we're going to go through these four cases. Positive times a positive, negative times a negative, positive times a negative, and negative times a positive. Okay, so positive times a positive. In the space in your notes, we'll just make up some quick examples. Let's do like 5 times 3. 5 times 3, you knew from when you learned multiplication, you have 5 groups of 3. That's 15. All right, if we do 4 times 6, you have 4 groups of 6. That's 24. And 2 times 5, if you have 2 groups of 5, that is 10. Okay, so positive times a positive, you always knew was a positive. That's old from elementary school when you learned multiplication. Okay, let's take those examples and bring them to the next page. Okay, now I'm sorry if this is in the wrong order, but we should be looking at a negative times a positive next. Okay, so I'm going to copy those examples that we just did. Okay, except we got to make the first number negative now. Okay, so let's do negative 5 times 3. Well, when I see that negative out in front, I think of the phrase the opposite. So what's the opposite of 5 times 3? Well, 5 times 3 is 15. The opposite of 15 is negative 15. Okay, same thing for the second one. Instead of 4 times 6, let's do negative 4 times 6. So 4 times 6 was 24. What's the opposite of 24? Negative 24. And the last example we did, 2 times 5 is 10. Well, what if I wanted to do negative 2 times 5? Well, the opposite of 10 is negative 10. Okay, so when you have a problem where, a multiplication problem where one of the values is negative, a negative times a positive will always give you a negative value. And it's going to be the opposite answers for what we got on the first page. Okay. Negative times a positive is always a negative. And this is something you're going to have to memorize. Okay, let's take a positive times a negative. So let's switch all these values around. So instead of negative 5 times 3, let's switch it. Let's do 3 times negative 5. Okay, so let's see positive times a negative. Okay, so the first one was 3 times negative 5. Second, let's switch these two values. So we'll do 6 times negative 4. And last, let's do negative 2 times 5. Let's switch those. We'll do 5 times negative 2. Okay, so the same problems, but in a different order. Okay, positive times a negative. Well, there's a rule in math that says you can switch the order and still get the same answer. Okay, so negative 5 times 3 is the same as 3 times negative 5. So we're going to get the same answers that we got before. 6 times negative 4, that's negative 24. 5 times negative 2, that's negative 10. So what is that rule in math that says if we switch them, we get the same answer? That's called the commutative property. So a positive times a negative is always going to be a negative. And it's the same answers as what we got before. So if one of the values is negative, it's always negative. Okay, let's copy these answers so we can figure out our last case. All right, so negative times a negative. Let me paste what we had from before. Okay, so our second value has to be negative, but our first value we have to make negative also. Okay, so instead of 3 times negative 5, it's going to be negative 3 times negative 5. Well, that negative out in front is going to have the opposite answer of what we got last time. Okay, so last time we got negative 15. So the opposite of negative 15 is positive 15. 6 times negative 4 was negative 24. Negative 6 times negative 4 is going to be the opposite answer for that. So it's going to be positive 24. And last time we did 5 times negative 2, we got negative 10. Well, negative 5 times negative 2 is going to have the opposite answer. Opposite of negative 10 is positive 10. Okay, so check out all these answers. This time they're all positive. So whenever you multiply a negative times a negative, it's always going to give you a positive number. Okay, negative times a negative is always a positive. Okay, so when you're thinking about multiplication, you can say that 2 wrongs do make a right. Okay, these negatives, they're both wrong, but in the end, it ends up being positive. Okay, so there were 4 cases that we spoke about, but really, there's only 2 rules to memorize. Okay, if you have a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative, well, those signs are the same, right? A positive is the same as a positive. A negative is the same as a negative. So if you ever have a multiplication problem where the signs are the same, your answer is always going to be positive. Okay, so if the signs are the same for multiplication, your answer is positive. If the signs are different, okay, so either a negative times a positive or the other way around, a positive times a negative, those answers were all negative. So if you have different signs, your answer is always negative. Okay, so you can write this down on top of a paper if you have a quiz. If the signs are the same, your answer is positive for multiplication, and if the signs are different, your answer is negative. Okay, so there are 2 rules to remember for multiplication. Okay, now the last operation is division. Okay, and we're actually lucky with division. Division is the same as multiplication. It follows the same exact rules. Okay, so a positive divided by a positive, or a negative divided by a negative. When those signs are the same, your answer is positive. But if they're different, a negative times a positive, or a positive times a negative, those are going to be negative. So if the signs are different, your answer is negative. Okay, so for division, there's nothing new to remember. Division follows the same rules as multiplication. Okay, so let's do some practice problems together, and then I'll have you try some. Okay, so for these problems, again, if the signs are the same, it's going to be positive. If the signs are different, it's going to be negative. Okay, so here I have a positive times a negative. They're different. It's going to be negative. Negative 6 times 3. 6 times 3 was 18. So negative 18. Number 2. They're both negative. The signs are the same. Your answer is going to be positive. So 4 times 7 is 28. Okay. Number 3. The product of 8 and negative 2. Okay. Product is just another word for the answer you get when you multiply. Okay. So you're going to do 8 times negative 2. Signs are different. My answer is going to be negative. So negative, and then 8 times 2 is 16. Okay, number 4. Number 4 is actually a multiplication problem. Okay, when you have an exponent, it means whatever number I have in parentheses, the exponent will tell me how many of them I have to multiply. Okay, so I have to multiply it twice. So negative 7 times negative 7. Okay, signs are the same. That answer is going to be positive. Okay, now I want to clarify something that I just thought of. Okay. These rules work for 2 numbers at a time. If I'm multiplying 3 numbers, okay, then I have to do them 2 at a time. Okay, so I would do the first 2, and then I would do the last one. Okay, let me copy that rule onto the next page for the last 5 problems, or last 4 problems. Okay, negative 124 divided by 3. Remember, this bar means divided by, and you type in the calculator from top to bottom. So negative 124 divided by 3. Signs are different. That answer is going to be negative, and that is 41.3 repeating. Quotient. Okay, quotient is a fancy word for divide. So I'm going to do negative 65 divided by negative 5. Okay, here the signs are the same. My answer is going to be positive, and then 65 divided by 5 is 13. So positive 13. Okay, number 7. With an exponent. So I have negative 2, but I'm going to multiply it by itself 3 times. Okay, negative 2 and negative 2. Okay, here's where we really have to do 2 numbers at a time. Okay, so negative 2 times negative 2, the first 2, will get you a positive 4. Right? Those 2, the signs are the same. Your answer is positive. Let me bring down this other negative 2. Now 4 times negative 2, well, now those signs are different, so that answer is negative. I get negative 8. Okay, and the last one to do together, these symbols, you have straight bars, that's absolute value. Okay, so they want the absolute value of negative 4 first before you divide that. Absolute value means how far a number is from 0. So the absolute value of negative 4 is positive 4. Now let me bring down the rest. Okay, now I can divide these. The signs are different, so my answer is negative. 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2. All right, hopefully you have some space just to do some practice problems. Okay, so I'm going to throw a bunch of practice problems at you to review multiplication and division. Okay, so here, negative 5 times negative 11. (13 plus negative 2). Negative 4 times 3. Negative 3 squared, or negative 3 to the second power. Negative 20 divided by negative 2. (18 divided by negative 2). Okay, let's do an exponent bigger than 2. So negative 3 to the third power. (2 times negative 4 times 3). Negative 2 to the third power. Negative 8 divided by 2. Okay, and one more. 6 squared divided by negative 3. Okay, just warning in this last problem, do the numerator first. Okay, so figure out what 6 squared is, and then divide that answer by negative 3. Okay, and here are all the answers in one place so you can check. Okay, the second one, I'm not sure how an addition problem got in there. There's supposed to be multiplication and division.